For more on the Ohio State Pro Day, let's bring in former Buckeye linebacker Joshua Perry. You now see him on the Big Ten Network. So, Joshua, let's start with Justin Fields and that 40-yard time, 4.44. He may have stumbled a little bit. What do you make of the 40 time?
Well, I spoke to Justin after he ran that 40. It was kind of wild because he said that he expected to run faster, but it was a good time. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, like, a good time that's blazing fast. And you could just see how explosive and smooth he looked. I think that was the big deal there. He definitely did stumble, but he showed his finesse as an athlete. He shows the power that he possesses. And when you look at him, really, he's built differently than a lot of guys who play the quarterback position. Well built up top, but he's got a thick lower body, which makes it really hard to tackle him. So I feel bad for defenders at the next level having to deal with him, but that time was just blazing.
We saw the speed. We also saw the arm. He looked pretty good throwing the ball, made the one where he's running left. This seems to be all the rage now in pro days. You got to run left and throw back 65 yards against the body. So what did you make of Fields throwing the ball?
It was a really good day, and I think the script that he had for his performance was really good. And he started some under center throws. He went out of the shotgun. He showed the rollout. And what he said is that he wanted to do some off-platform throws, which I thought was really good. He had scripts to hit at every different level of the field, short, intermediate, and deep. And he also had a full plethora of body types that he was throwing to as well. He had running backs out there, tight ends, and wide receivers, so you got to kind of see that. But the one throw that everybody's talking about, the rollout where he threw it deep, that one was impressive. There was another one where I was standing next to an assistant GM down there on the field, and Justin threw kind of a comeback route on the sideline. And the assistant GM said to me, that is the throw. That's an NFL throw right there. It was on time. The velocity on the ball was really good. And so that's what they were looking for out of Justin Fields, was that arm strength and that ability and that velocity, the things he needs to do at the next level to separate himself. And he did a really good job of opening some eyes and turning some heads.
Okay, let's talk about the big beef this week. Dan Orlowski, an analyst, a former quarterback, he talked about Fields, and he said that he was hearing some things, that Justin was the last one in, the first one out, didn't have the drive. Then he came back the next day and said, well, to clarify, now I've talked to people really close to Justin. They say that's not true. So, Joshua, it looks to me like someone made a comment that wasn't informed, then got informed and changed his mind. I wanted to know your take on this whole Orlowski controversy.
Yeah, and I think in defense of Dan Orlovsky, he prefaced it by saying it was something that he heard from somebody else. So it wasn't his own opinion. He's been very complimentary of Justin Fields throughout this process. But the fact of the matter is he absolutely got played. He was used to put that out there into the world. And this is a time of the year where you start to see some of these leaks coming out about players, and you get the negative information. It's really a smokescreen from teams that are interested in a certain player that they hope that he falls to their position so they can draft him. So they put this bad information out there. Anybody you would talk to around Ohio State would say that Justin Fields is a guy who shows up early. He's a guy who stays late. To be successful as a quarterback in Ryan Day's system, you have to do that because the quarterback is in charge of making a lot of checks, and he has to understand. You hear Ryan Day talk about the quarterback position at Ohio State, about being mental, and he's a guy who comes from the NFL. So I think that has prepared Justin Fields. But it's really interesting to hear that. To me personally, I think anybody who would say that, it's a lazy evaluation. I think it plays into certain tropes about players and what we're supposed to think about them when they look a certain way. And so I thought just from that regard, it was, it sat poorly with me, but anybody would go to his defense and say that he's one of the guys. And just to pull this all together, Justin Fields had every opportunity to opt out this season. Instead, he was on the front lines leading the Big Ten back to playing football. He took that hit during the Clemson game. It would have knocked a lot of people out. He came back in that game. He played injured in the national championship game. It's a guy who loves football. He loves the grind of it.
You went through the draft process, the combine process. How important are these drills? Because on one level, it's silly that watching you run around cones means you're going to be a good football player, but they do it to measure explosiveness and other things. So how important are these drills in projecting? And is there a drill or two that you look at and say, okay, that one translates to the NFL?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important to see these guys run around, specifically this year without having a central combine in Indianapolis. You have to see all the guys work out on the field just to check all the boxes. I think the big thing there is you watch the tape, you make an evaluation of a player off the tape. You watch the workout to make sure that the player is checking the boxes. You want to see discrepancies. Is the player maybe more athletic than you thought? It doesn't turn out that the player is less athletic than you thought. And then the other thing you get to watch is how these players interact with their teammates, how they interact with the personnel and the coaches that are present during these workouts too, because that's a big part of the evaluation and really the opportunity for NFL personnel to get their hands on. When I watch workouts for quarterbacks, obviously there's not a lot that you can take away because it's routes on air. There's not a pass rush, but is the ball on target? Does it come out with the proper velocity? Does he carry himself with confidence? When you watch the movement drills for linebackers or defensive line, you want to see the body mechanics. Do the hands and hips work together? Are they explosive? For linebackers specifically, when you ask them to shuffle, can they shuffle on a plane, or are they kind of all over the place? When you're watching drops, do they understand their proximity on the field when they're dropping? Those things are important. And so I think that's really the evaluation there, is to make sure that these players, it really just confirms everything you've seen on tape.
Okay, so given all the information, we watch them work out, we have hours of film, we do interviews with the player, we interview their coaches, references. How do scouts get it wrong so often, Joshua? Why can they not project better than they do?
The evaluation process is imperfect, and that's the best way to put it. And the other thing too is we're dealing with humans making evaluations here, so emotions tied to it. There are teams that just tend to fall in love with certain players. They see a guy, they love the personality, they love what they meant for the team, whatever the case is. So they fall in love with that player, maybe overdraft them because they're, just that's what they wanted to do. It's not necessarily based off the tape. And so I think that's kind of the big thing there, but just really understanding that, for references, for example, you could get a reference from somebody who you feel like was really in tune. They understand exactly what was going on. That person could be a liar. And so that'll cloud the judgment of the people making decisions as it comes to draft day. So again, a process where they spend a ton of time, but there are a lot of pitfalls in it.
I know sometimes we see a guy like Zeke Elliott who excels at Ohio State and excels in the pros. And then we see guys like Michael Thomas who don't get showcased as much at Ohio State and blow up in the pros. I'm curious to get your take on someone like a Pete Werner, who I think Buckeye fans have been harsh to at times. Someone like him, what kind of pro could he become?
And just always blows my mind when we talk about Pete Werner and how anybody could be derogatory toward him. His first year starting maybe wasn't the best year, but last couple of years watching him, he was very impressive. He was a linebacker every time somebody had to go out in coverage. Who was the coverage linebacker? He did a great job. You never heard his name because he wasn't getting run by, he wasn't getting a penalty, and he wasn't making a tackle downfield. He was playing lockdown coverage. Again, a guy who could step in the box and make the tackles that you needed him to make. He could run sideline to sideline. And he's somebody that was versatile. He played a number of positions at Ohio State. We sit here as fans and we make our evaluations. I think NFL personnel understands that. I think his workout really helped them. The hardest part is when you get that player like Michael Thomas, who was not utilized properly. He was underutilized at Ohio State. You know that the talent exists there. You see the traits that you think can make him great at the next level, but you have nothing to confirm that because the tape does not exist. It's hard to make, 3, 4, 5, 20, $30 million bet on a guy when you don't have all the information present. And I think that's what hurts some prospects.
I want to ask you about one other guy, Tommy Togiai. Watching who do the bench press, it looked like he was lifting a pixie stick. I mean, I couldn't believe how many reps he was doing. What did you think of Togiai's workout, and how does he project?
So it was wild watching it. I was standing right there by the bench press, and Tommy goes up. And you have to understand, pro day is a pretty subdued environment. Like everybody's kind of quiet. They're just really watching and they're taking everything in. Tommy goes up there. You could almost hear a pin drop as he addresses the bar. And then as soon as he starts lifting, the room erupts and all the players are getting excited. He did 40 reps total on the bench press, 225. He did 38 of those reps without taking a pause. Typically, you'll see guys, they'll get to like 10. They'll pause, catch their breath, do 5 more reps, pause, do 3 reps, whatever the case is. He banged out 38 straight reps, paused, and then got his last 2 in and racked the bar. It was absolutely amazing. He's strong, but he backed it up with a really good on-field performance too. People had questions about athleticism. Is he maybe a little bit tight in the hips? Yes. But the power comes through, and he's a go-hard guy.